Hello, and welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. I'm Ryan Purvis, your host, supported by our producer Heather Bicknell. In this series, you'll hear stories and opinions from experts in the field, stories from the front lines, the problems they face and how they solve them, the areas they focused on from technology, people and processes, to the approaches they took that will help you to get to the grips with the digital workspace inner workings.
Yeah, very good. Thanks. Very good. It's just as usual, too many balls in the air. Too much going on. It feels like the world has woken up again or something.
I can I can relate to that. Just go. Never know when to take a moment to take a deep breath and take it all in.
Yeah, exactly. It just feels like I don't know, just from a time point of view, even though you're not commuting, maybe what's happened is we've just filled up the time now because you're not commuting everywhere. So now you have even less time because you don't have that buffer when you got to commute. Maybe that's it. I don't know.
I sort of wish, from a work perspective, like, imagine this. You go into an office every day. Maybe you have, a commute that's not super fun, but there's no work tech yet that can follow you home. You don't have a company laptop. Your phone doesn't do your email, and you just go home and work is done. I think that's it for me, is that even, before commuting to an office, everyone's leaving around the 5 to 6 mark. You shut your computer down. Maybe you'll check a couple Teams messages or your email at home, but you're not going to, you can't get that sucked into work because work's at work. So that's it for me anyway.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I remember when I was starting out my career in the Microsoft world, I had an MD, and he used to, every time he caught us working late at night, which was pretty much every night, he used to say, I wish we were just making widgets. There's only a certain amount of widgets you make a day, and then if you don't make enough, you don't make them that day. That's it. Because I don't think he ever understood the whole technicalities of what we were actually doing, writing software. So his understanding was always limited. And people moan about working in an office job sometimes, like a normal job, and sometimes you wish you had that job because this kind of work you can just do all the time. You could work till midnight every night and still not finish it because it's always there.
Yeah. So you have to set your own boundaries and stuff, but it's easier said than done sometimes.
Well, that is the problem, and you've got to give yourself permission to take a break as well. So going for that walk or watching a little bit of Netflix, not everything. Otherwise, you just blow up. And that's where I think mental wellness has come back. Well, it's always been there, but it's definitely something that's talked about a lot more often.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't want to complain too much because we have some pretty hefty topics on for today that really put, I guess, work in a new light. So we had talked about, we have 2 topics really at the intersection of, I think, humans, machines, and labor. And they're both interesting because in one of the topics, it's sort of like the wizard behind the curtain. Things seem much more magical and refined than maybe they truly are. And then on the other topic, I think it's interesting because maybe we are in some ways more ahead than we might have thought. So I don't know if you want to, we can dig into the first one on the, human beings training a lot of the AI that's out there today. Both, the low paid labor that exists out there and the companies that are hiring people sort of on a contract basis to do AI, data model training and, train image engines and stuff like that, which can be really stressful and in some cases, like, traumatic work even for things like content moderation.
Yeah, let's start with that. And I'll be honest, I mean, we used to joke about the thing of the student API, which it didn't really translate to in a lot of meetings until people got the concept. But basically, you're paying students to do the work until you could justify investing in the sophisticated tool. And I've worked in various organizations with various complicated things that AI could be used to solve. And the one that I was thinking about as well was this legal documents when you sign agreements in different countries, and the clauses and all the rest of it are written in the local language, but you've got to get that back to a common language and make sure that you haven't misinterpreted the clause through the translation process. And the company in mind had about, I don't know, there was a few hundred employees that were PhDs, legal experts, and also language experts, and they were translating, from Polish to English and French to English and whatever it was, and they were trying to do all the stuff. And the theory was if they could automate that using machine learning, they could save like $1 million a month in salaries. But I don't think they, even though they could use the technology, they could only get to maybe a 60%, 70% improvement. So you still needed the experts, but at least you were speeding up the process, because that was the other thing is, to go through contracts takes time, and especially ones with nuances to them because is always a different deal or whatever it is. But this article surprised me because of some of the other things which I knew of products that were built where there was no AI, but they were telling you it was an AI. And you just knew because of some article by accident where they let it slip. But then you find out through the grapevine about other ones where they're selling it as an AI tool, but actually it's a whole bunch of humans doing it. And I think one of them was a scheduling tool for meetings. Before Cortana came along, and they said they would do, this tool would organize your meetings for you, and then you realize, and they found out that it was people because the language wasn't exactly right. It was different people writing responses. But yeah, it's not surprising now that having read the article.
Yeah, definitely. Unfortunately, not surprising. I think we know, right, that a lot of even the stuff that actually is AI, putting aside the things that are just faked, like fully faked, that these algorithms, these data sets like this, there's a lot of repetitive, like unglamorous work that's behind building up a lot of these, large models and actually doing the training piece. And there are humans behind that. So we've been hearing a lot about, ChatGPT and generative AI and all of this stuff. I think, and it's coming in the news cycle a little bit more, but the actual people behind training a lot of those, things that just like are blowing people's minds right now. We kind of miss that it's not just AI, automatically doing it, right? That there are people behind the scenes, maybe not getting treated super well, who are actually getting the things to that state by training them.
Yeah, and if you remember that, when Capture came out on your website, it was asking you to confirm those images, etc. That was a part of crowdsourcing labeling of the data, which is what what we're talking about here. And, in order for machine learning and all that stuff to work, you need to have a set of data that is correctly labeled and a set that isn't, and allow the algorithm to process, and this is supervised learning, and allow the data that isn't labeled to go through the algorithm that versus what has been, and that's what they call it when they call it training. That's what they mean. And then you still need someone to check it. Now the unsupervised learning is basically point the algorithm at all the data and see what it comes out with, which is really groupings and classifications and that sort of thing. I think if you look at any sort of sweatshop stigma, the kids building shoes in Vietnam or whatever it is for Nike or Adidas, whoever it was, I don't know who it was back in those days. That analogy could be applied to this as well, where you're paying people to do, brain dead data capturing, to be honest, and paying them a low wage. But you've got to take into context of, is that wage low by first world society based on where you live, the pound versus the dollar, versus what they earn in that country. I mean, I was talking to people this morning about some resources and discussing what you'd pay for that resource in the UK. And if you multiply that out into rands, it's a ridiculously big number. I mean, you're talking 3, 4, 5 times the thing. And if you go look at the resource, here in South Africa, it's a good resource, getting a good salary in South African terms, but not what you'd be paid in pounds. But then your living cost in pounds is also significantly higher. So, you've always got to balance these things out. I guess as long as the people are humanely treated and they, get benefits and employee benefits and all those sorts of things, or at least they're entering into contract with a choice, they, they're not forced into it. It should be okay, in theory.
Yeah, I think, I think it was a Vice article that we're discussing, so we'll link it in the show notes. So they do bring up the point about, wages being, or money going farther in different economies. I think one of the interesting points they also noted was that because a lot of this is gig work, that there's not sort of advancement opportunities necessarily in this line of work. So it's being, even though there is some skill and there is skill to this labor, if you read the experiences of the people working doing this kind of work, they do have to learn things to be able to do it. I think it's being treated as unskilled labor, and then they don't have, because it's gig work and they're just doing one-off things, bidding for jobs basically. There's less of an advancement pipeline. So I think it's just a good good thing to be aware of, that this kind of work, just like we people were aware of sweatshops and any of it, it's like a digital version. AI isn't just magic. There are people behind the scenes sometimes. So I think just good to be aware of that in all the noise about the excitement of AI.
Yeah, look, and let's not take away from ChatGPT as an example. Everyone will understand this one at least. That is something that has been built, designed, tagged, all that kind of stuff, and to our knowledge so far has used unsupervised learning to build out its training models, and it's it's in its 4th version, or 3.5 now, going into its 4th version. There are a lot of AIs that are built that way, where it's truly artificial. But there are these other ones where exactly that they're taking the thing. I mean, I'll share a story of my recent trip up to Joburg, and I was talking to one of the drivers that I use, and I met him as an Uber driver, and I just at the time said, look, I need a trustworthy driver that I can just call on when I need to. I don't want to go through Uber. I'll pay you directly. And he's been my driver for every time I do a trip to Joburg, and over the years. And he was telling me about how he can't even live off what he gets out of Uber anymore, because their algorithm and their choices are impacting him directly. They're deciding that a trip that's 0 to 20 kilometers they'll pay one rate, and then a trip that's over 20 kilometers they'll pay a quarter of the rate. And in Johannesburg and Cape Town and all that, most of your trips are over 20 Ks. So he's always getting the worst rate. And it's not just him, it's all the other Uber drivers. And that's a case where the data is not being applied to the economy that it's in. And if I pay a private taxi guy, we're in Mossel Bay at the moment, I pay them 10 Rand a kilometer. The equivalent for this driver in Joburg is about 8 Rand a kilometer within the 20 Ks, and goes down to 4 Rand over 20. So, we don't have to go through the whole math of why that's bad, but it is bad. The price of a litre of fuel is 13, 14 Rand. And I know in dollars and pounds, these are very small numbers because you're dividing that by 18 or dividing that by 20. But these guys have to live, support families, etc. And this is where and I think this is part of where Elon Musk was saying things need to be regulated. If you're using people involved in these things, there needs to be some level of minimum wage that is regulated. So when you implement a gig-based technology, that needs to comply with the minimum wage in their country, to provide the minimum living standard. If you are, and you're right, there's no career progression. I mean, this driver or the driver here in the tech, they have no choices. They can't go and become a team leader or earn more money that way. They're driving long hours to generate the minimum income, so they're stuck. Now, if you look at where some of these plans are with these technologies, self-driving cars and all that kind of stuff, these sorts of jobs won't even exist in the future if these all go to plan. So, what do you do with those people? The driver in Joburg was saying to me, what do I do? I need to learn computers now. How do I learn computers? And you're sitting there going, well, how do you train someone that's got no skills, really, inverted commas, because most of them don't, into a technology world where already the chat GDP is generating code, writing your problem statements for you and all that kind of stuff, because the data has just been processed and pushed out. That curve has just gotten more aggressive to learn at a speed to catch up. So it's a very interesting and scary problem that's coming, because you're going to have a whole lot of people that don't have the know-how to go up a level, and in many jobs, not just the one I've mentioned.
Yeah, I think this is actually a good transition into the other sort of side of the human-machine labor equation that we'd been looking into, which is robotics as a service. The latest as a service that I have heard about. Everything, what can't be as a service now? I challenge you. But renting robots, essentially mainly for manufacturing or warehousing roles. Obviously, it's replacing sort of one root task of lifting something here, putting something there, screwing whatever widget in. But there's definitely aspirations and goals to add AI and ML to the mix and make these things more intelligent and be able to do more skills as well. And I thought it was interesting. There was an employer talking about how, he can rent these robots for $8 an hour and a human costs $15 an hour. So, he personally is like, well, we're not going to downsize our staff, but maybe we don't need to hire more. We can, let our people do more interesting work. But it is overall, I think, going to reduce the job pool as things like this become, like the economics there. If you can rent for 8 versus pay for 15, and especially if you're a small business, it's the classic robots will take our jobs, which they have in a lot of manufacturing settings already. There's a lot of technology that has come in to replace previous human labor.
Yeah, and I think some of it makes sense. I mean, I remember a very good book many years ago. What was it called? I think it was called Airframe. Or it might have been Disclosure, actually. I think it was Disclosure. It was a Michael Crichton book. And the story is all about sexual harassment and all that kind of stuff. But the part that's important to our conversation is they were manufacturing a computer in Asia and they couldn't get it to meet the quality standards. And what they realized at the end of the book, the conclusion was actually the problem was that the humans putting the chip into the computer, onto the motherboard, didn't have the accuracy or the finesse to put the chip in the right place every single time. And that's why some batches were good and some batches were bad. And it's kind of that point. So when you have repetitive tasks with a need to be accurate and all the rest, I have no problem with that being a machine-driven thing. And if it's an intelligent machine that does that and it saves a human life, or it augments what the human will do. And you remember we talked about that power suit for lifting things and that sort of stuff. I don't have a problem with that. And if you look at logistics and warehousing and that sort of stuff, we got to put boxes away and pick them up and carry them, move them around. It makes total sense that's using some sort of technology to solve that problem. Where it becomes probably concerning again is, a lot of the economies that exist are based on having a certain level of certain blue collar and a certain level of white collar workers. And as the technology will eat into those industries, where do you put the people that don't have jobs anymore? How do they provide for families and all that kind of stuff? And you're seeing it already in some industries where and self-driving cars, self-driving trucks are probably not the ones to look at, but it's the I was doing some legal work over the weekend and I asked a lawyer for something and he didn't charge me because he said, look, all I did was write down 3 sentences to what I wanted, and we generated the template from this product that we use, and I'll only charge you if you want me to change anything in the contract. So that would have normally been a week's worth of work, let's say. But I got the contract, I looked at it, it was actually fairly okay, and I'm sending it off to another attorney to give it a second look because I just want to make sure that by doing it so quickly, so cheaply, that I haven't actually opened up a huge thing. And that's a that's a sort of white collar job that's potentially going away. If you look at something very basic like providing garbage collection services, why could that not be an automated bot that drives down your driveway and picks up using vision AI to pick up the right dustbin to tip into the thing, and there's a human watching it, but let it carry on, because that's a meaningless task, to be fair, and why not have a machine do that? And if you're dealing with hazardous waste and all those things, I think it makes sense. Where I think we get into another murky thing is, some countries, and South Africa is one of them, legislate that there has to be a job for everybody. And for example, a petrol attendant is a very common job. I mean, there's always someone doing the petrol thing, and by law there has to be a petrol attendant. So even though you could have a machine, you could do it yourself, there will still be a petrol attendant there that has to be paid. So you're gonna have to see constitutions change in some respects, and I don't have any other examples, but that was one that I was thinking of when I looked at this article, because I think in Egypt I had the same thing. There were people helping the person doing the job just because they have to pay a person to do something. So there was like a guy carrying the broom for the guy sweeping the streets. So that person had a job.
No, I think it's really complicated, and I wonder how some of these things could intersect with movements toward the 4-day work week or even the 3-day work week. I think if we haven't even touched on things like universal basic income, but if we all we're talking about how stressed we are with everything that's going on and there's so much work, if we could just spread out that work a bit more and also skill people up. But anyway, I wonder if some of that could be sort of help redistribute some of this.
So I don't know if you saw that study on the 4-day week in the UK. I think it was the UK. Of all the companies that did it, I think the majority are sticking with it. So they're not going back to a 5-day. And I think that is going to be the reality. I think you're going to get a situation where And there's been a lot of stuff in one of the podcasts I listened to about one of the publishing companies, I think it was CNET, was generating a whole lot of articles using AIs. And Wordsmith was the AI, I think. And they were saying, yeah, but these are for generic articles that it's not worth having a journalist write them. And obviously it's using the AI, but it's also using the AI to make it SEO heavy. Which kind of becomes funny because now you're writing stuff artificially to become artificially more search sensitive, and the algorithms are artificially using it, and they're going to discard it because it's too perfect. But I think it'll happen. I look at we went to the movies on Sunday. We walk. Okay, look again. A lot of people involved in the process, but I booked everything online. Including the food. I got there, the food was ready. I picked it up. We walked into the cinema. I needed something more. I texted the guy on WhatsApp. I need another thing of popcorn. He brought it to me. That could be a robotic thing, it could be a drone flying around carrying popcorn. But the point is, it's the technology has made it so close to demand driven that that person who was bringing me the popcorn literally was just. All he did was pick it up and bring it to me. There was no need for him to process the credit card transaction or take the order or anything like that. He was literally just bringing it to me. So how long until that job is just replaced by something else?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's happening everywhere. So I'm sure it won't be the last time we talk about it, but unfortunately, I do have to wrap up here for today.
Super. Thanks for that chat soon.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Heather Bicknell is our producer and editor. Thank you, Heather, for your hard work on this episode. Please subscribe to the series and rate us on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Follow us on Twitter @the DWW Podcast. The show notes and transcripts will be available on the website www.digitalworkspace.works. Please also visit our website www.digitalworkspace.works and subscribe to our newsletter. And lastly, if you found this episode useful, please share with your friends or colleagues.